Okay, hello everybody. My name is Ivan Zvonkov. I'm from the University of Maryland, working with NASA Surveyor. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make it in person due to some flight issues, but I'll be presenting project-driven capacity building with a case study in Senegal. So this is what my presentation will cover. First, our capacity building as a team and my personal capacity building experience over the last few years. I'll talk about what has not worked for us in terms of capacity building, and then I'll give an overview of some of the things that we did in our latest effort with Senegal, which was the project-driven capacity building project, um, and share what has worked there. All right, so starting with our capacity building experience, this is talking about myself with Dr. Catherine Nakalembe, who has led many of these projects with Severe. Over the past few years, we have done single-day workshops with the Kenya Space Agency, Makerere University, Rwanda Space Agency, and Carnegie Mellon University with their Rwanda campus. And we've also done multi-day workshops with the Regional Center for Mapping and Resource Development, RCMRD, in Kenya, and the Centre de Suivi Écologique de Senegal group that I'll be talking about at the end. So for these different organizations, we've primarily focused on cropland mapping. The first few iterations, we really kind of just demoed our workflow, and then we started to add more lectures onto our capacity building effort. We expanded to focus on crop type mapping in our week-long session with RCMRD. But with our latest effort with CSC, we simply did cropland analysis and mapping with Google Earth Engine, no crop type mapping. We decided to keep it more simple. All right, so what has not worked? Here's four things I'm going to talk about that haven't worked for us. Number one, demos. Number two, focusing on state of the art. Three, using complex tools. And four, large audiences. So demos, a plus with doing demos is that not much can go wrong if the demo has been planned well in advance, um, especially showing off new interesting state-of-the-art methods or tools is impressive to the audience often, but it's uncertain how much utility that actually provides to the audience and to the people that are there to learn. Um, Demos don't have that kind of hands-on component that's often necessary to carry something away. So they're useful maybe in small doses, but large impressive demos have not been extremely useful in our experience. Another thing that hasn't worked is focusing on state-of-the-art methods. For example, the latest and greatest deep learning and AI methods. Um, it's interesting to train organization on the latest and greatest, and it's closely related to my own personal research and our group's research, and therefore it's exciting to talk about. However, it often makes the training and capacity building workshop focused on explaining and learning about this method, about deep learning, about machine learning, about AI, versus the actual task at hand, which can be done in some more simpler and basic way. Similarly, using complex tools has not been extremely effective in our experience. So we use Google Cloud in some of our work, but training other organizations on using Google Cloud has a similar disadvantage that focusing on state-of-the-art methods does, which is the training becomes focused on understanding the complex tool. So in the case of Google Cloud, it becomes focused on understanding deployment, discussions about budget, how to set up Google Cloud properly, rather than the key task, which in our case is cropland mapping and area estimation, and maybe crop type mapping. So using complex tools has not worked, and focusing on the most basic, bare bones, simple tools at the beginning is in our experience a little bit better. Another thing that hasn't worked is large audiences. While with a large audience, it makes the workshop feel important. Many people are paying attention, and there's a higher chance that at least one of those people in the audience will find something useful. The training becomes unfocused due to varying skill levels. there's often people who, the larger the audience, there will be people who have no coding experience or very little agricultural experience. Um, there will also be people with a lot of experience and expertise, maybe with PhDs in the field, and therefore someone finds it too slow, the training, and someone finds it too fast, and it's impossible to cater to any one group. So the smaller the audience, the easier it is to focus on the skill level, to focus the pace on the skill level that's needed for that audience. Um, Another issue with a large audience is that it's more likely that people will enter and exit the workshop because they don't feel like the workshop has to stop if they exit. And this just creates a whole environment that's not the best for learning. If it's just a few people, less than 10 ideally, um, then everybody has a responsibility to learn. Everyone feels that responsibility, and the workshop goes more effectively. All right, now I'll talk about our our latest capacity building workshop in Senegal, which was project driven and uh, which I felt was way more successful than previous efforts. What do I mean by project driven capacity building? This means a capacity building workshop structured around small groups working on a project and presenting that project at the end, rather than me or my teammates lecturing or presenting demos. It's focused on the people in the workshop doing some work related to this cropland mapping in our case, and then presenting their project at the end. So how this looked like in Senegal was, first of all, who was there? It was myself and many of our team members from the University of Maryland / Severe team. And then our collaborative partner here was the Centre de Suivi Écologique, which is meant to use remote sensing data for cropland mapping such that they can collaborate with the agricultural department in Senegal. We had a 5-day workshop, and you can see kind of the schedule laid out over here. On Monday, we talked a lot about the context. On Tuesday, we talked about data collection. On Wednesday, we did data application. Thursday was almost entirely dedicated to practicing and working on the project. And Friday, we ended with presentations from each group and some inspirational presentations from our side in terms of what can be done now that they have the skills to effectively make cropland maps. The project was every group, between 2 to 3 people, mapped cropland and analyzed cropland over 2 agroecological zones in Senegal. So every group had 2 different zones such that the entire country was covered. What this project looked like in detail was there was 3 different sections. And the first section was that each group had to understand the crops within their area of interest. So we provided these kind of guidelines where every group would research an overview of their agroecological zones, research the climatology, physical characteristics, socioeconomic factors, and crop dynamics within their agroecological zone. Rather than us presenting what those things are, we asked each group, we showed a demonstration of some of these, but mostly we asked each group to do the research and supported their research. Then before just jumping into creating a new map right away, we asked each group to analyze existing cropland maps. There are now many remote sensing derived cropland maps available, global and regional. And so we provided Google Earth Engine scripts to make the analysis of those maps straightforward. So in particular, we asked each group to do a visual assessment. So just loading cropland maps from World Cover, for example, or Dynamic World or World Serial, loading those cropland maps using Google Earth Engine, analyzing them visually, and seeing if they match their expectation. If the crops generally appear in the right area, if there's any significant omission or commission errors, if features like rivers are classified correctly, etc. We also provided data that we had gathered in advance of the capacity building workshop, specific reference labels so that an accuracy assessment could be done on some of the existing maps, and a quantitative measure of the quality of the maps could be produced. So we provided both the data and example scripts that groups could use to analyze their particular agroecological zones. Once that analysis was done, each group was then asked to create a cropland map for their region of interest. So this involved a couple of things. They had to present the overview of their mapping approach, and we did a couple lectures on the random forest approach in Google Earth Engine. They had to present the data sets that they used. We started with Sentinel-2 to keep it simple, without the addition of auxiliary data. They also were asked to present the models and algorithms they employed. And finally, their visual assessment and accuracy assessment of their own cropland map, such that they have a comparison with some of the existing stuff that they analyzed in part two. As part of the last part of their presentation to us was, they had a conclusion about the quality of their map that they created and which future directions or recommendations they might take as a group. So all of this was possible, or made a lot easier because we provided template scripts for all the different parts of this project. We had template scripts for loading a world cover map. We had template scripts for loading many different existing maps into Google Earth Engine. We had a template script for evaluating accuracy, for analyzing Sentinel-2 data, for doing just bare bones classification with some data that we provided, and for doing classification with corrective points that could be added in the regions where there was some misclassification. And then we had a simple Google Earth Engine script to delineate the agroecological zones so they could be easily visualized. So this meant that a lot of that kind of code that you need to get started was already there, and they just had to kind of switch out different pieces of the code, and that made the whole process a lot more fluid. So, in conclusion, the outcomes of this kind of project-driven capacity building were threefold. Firstly, at the end of the week, we had 3 different groups present their cropland maps over different agroecological zones, and these presentations are actually available on our website. So each group had a good understanding of their agroecological region and created a map for that region and was able to present it. Our workshop is currently being used as the basis for the CSC's creating cropland maps and area estimates for the past 5 years. So we're working with Cyrille from CSC to create these cropland maps. And finally, our workshop website, which I've linked right over here, has been used as the basis for students to learn about cropland mapping at completely different institutions. So people reached out to us from the University of Hawaii, and we basically shared the website with some data points, and they were able to make similar projects independently. So those 3 things have been the benefits of focusing the capacity building on a project, and this is I hope this is useful to the audience here. Thank you.